For the Sake of My Children, a novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel narrates the life story of an Australian girl who fell in love with a Saudi man. Then she converted to Islam, married her Arab lover, and traveled with him to the Muslim world. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on a true love affair between a former Christian girl and a Muslim immigrant. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. The prologue. The white girl Irshad is sitting in front of her tent and looking at her 6 little children with many hot tears welling up in her beautiful eyes. She is feeling extremely hot from the scorching sun and the Islamic burqa which wrapped her body from head to toe. She can see her children through a small hole in her niqab, which is as small as an eye of a needle. She is suffering from a strong suicidal mood. She is deeply immersed in her suicidal thoughts, which have been haunting her for several months. She tried many times to end her life, but she was always prevented by the fear of leaving her children orphans and begging for food on the streets of Kandahar city. If it is not for her children, she would have shot herself in the head and ended it all and got out of her hellish life in the Muslim world. Irshad knows for sure that her 3 young sons will grow up as terrorists and blow their bodies to shreds for the holy cause of Islamic jihad. Her 3 daughters are also expected to be forced to marry Taliban Mujahideen men and give birth to more Muslim terrorists. To avoid these unpleasant consequences, she decided to return to Australia, where she was born and raised. Unfortunately, her Australian embassy in Islamabad city refused to give her a passport because she had been associated with Muslim terrorists for many years. The only escape that Irshad thought of was to end her life and leave that miserable and hellish life. She even entertained the idea of killing her own children with her. Irshad could not believe that a day would come in her life when she would turn to such an inhumane thought of trying to kill her children. Even animals do not kill their young. The white girl knows in her native country that all care and education will be provided for her 6 children so that they will grow up as good citizens. In Afghanistan, her sons will not avoid their fate of being raised as terrorists and her daughters being illiterate and marrying Taliban fighters. The Australian girl recalled how her parents and friends tried to prevent her from marrying an immigrant Muslim boy. At that time, she was blinded by her intense love for her Arab colleague. In those days, she would see her Muslim friend as an angel who came down from heaven to give her the love and joy she longed for. She liked his reddish Arab complexion and his height. She enjoyed hearing his accent when he spoke English. She liked the way he spoke and walked. She found her lover Mustafa very polite and loving. Everything she loves in a man she found in her Arab boyfriend. He became her English lover Romeo, and she became his British beloved Juliet, or her mad lover Kays, and she was his beloved Arab girlfriend, Layla. In a brief time, he became her idol, and she worshipped him. Everything he wanted her to do, she did for him. He made her abandon her family, friends, and country, and she traveled with him to his homeland in Saudi Arabia. She even left her Christian faith and converted to Islam. In the end, her Arab friend Mustafa changed her name from Susan to Irshad and married her. To understand why the Australian girl was driven to such a frenzy that ultimately drove her to descend into this desperate and hellish life of Muslim Mujahideen terrorists in Afghanistan, we need to go back in time and space and uncover the driving reason behind her conversion to Islam. Chapter 1. Susan Peterson. The desperate and suicidal white girl Irshad was born and raised in Sydney, Australia. She was born to deeply religious Christian parents. She has an older brother named John. Her father, Mr. Frank Peterson, holds a senior position in a large import-export company. Her mother, Mrs. Mary Peterson, is a teacher at a high school. Before converting to Islam, Irshad Al-Shamari was known as Susan Peterson. She was raised by her very loving parents. Her parents dedicated their time and wealth to giving her and her brother everything they needed for their proper education and upbringing. Susan always dreamed of being a diplomat and going abroad to work in the Australian Embassy in the Third World. To fulfill her dream, she wants to learn some foreign languages along with her excellent knowledge of English and French. She is also fascinated from an early age by wanting to experience a different culture. When she entered the university, she met many international students from China and the Middle East. At first, Susan is inclined to learn the Chinese language and culture. She found out that there was no college in her city that taught Chinese. Then Susan tried to learn Chinese from some of her classmates. Most of her Chinese friends are extremely poor in English and none of them speak French. However, she became friends for some time with a young Chinese man who came to Australia on a student visa. During her brief love affair, Susan went to a nightclub with her Chinese boyfriend and drank alcohol for the first time. Before she learns Chinese, she finds out that her boyfriend is not true to his love. His main motive is to use her to obtain Australian citizenship. Therefore, she broke up with her Chinese boyfriend and gave up on learning his language. Susan then reveals to her family her failed friendship with the foreign boy. Her parents are outraged when they discover her affair with the Chinese boy and that he has impregnated her. She wanted to abort the child, but her parents stood firm against her decision. They told her that having an abortion was as a heinous crime as killing her own child. She then resigned to her parents' decision, but told them she could not take care of the child. Her parents reluctantly agreed to raise the child and left her to continue her education. Accordingly, after giving birth to her first child, Susan returned to her college. After that, she focused her efforts on learning the Arabic language and Middle Eastern culture. The student advisor told her that her quest to learn Arabic culture and language could be successfully accomplished if she learned Islam and the language in which the Quran was composed and written. On the advice of that student advisor, Susan decided to learn Arabic, the religion of most Arabs. She enrolled in the Arabic language and religious studies class, which teaches a course entitled Introduction to Islam. Unfortunately, in many Western universities, Islam is taught to students as a righteous, tolerant, and peaceful religion. They are often told that Islamic terrorists adopt a twisted version of Islam. On the contrary, Christianity is presented in high schools and universities as a religion that for many years tried to prevent scientific discoveries and modernity and was behind the Dark Ages in Europe. It is almost a crime in some Western universities to write or speak negatively about Islam. Students are not encouraged to consult the internet or the media while learning about Islam. A student may fail an exam or get low grades if he disobeys the teacher and writes negatively about the Prophet Muhammad. Susan Peterson was motivated by her intense love of learning about foreign cultures and thus began to explore the culture of the Middle East and the main religion of the Arabs. During her first year at college, she met a Saudi student who had come as a refugee to Sydney. He told her why his Muslim family immigrated to Australia. He said his parents had to flee their country because they did not follow the strict and terrorist Wahhabi school of the royal family. According to him, many Saudis were thrown into prison, and some were beheaded for criticizing the official doctrine of the Ibn Saud royal family. Even the kingdom and the citizens got their names from that royal family. Susan sympathized with the Saudi immigrant and appreciated his family's decision to abandon their homeland because they had decided to follow a moderate form of Islam. It wasn't long before Susan fell in love with this Arab immigrant and decided to make him her life partner. Her Saudi boyfriend is named Mustafa Al-Shamari. He is a deeply religious Muslim student. He is the antithesis of her Chinese ex-boyfriend. He immigrated to Australia from Jordan with his mother, 3 brothers, and 4 sisters. His father, Sheikh Al-Shamari, had to flee his country, Saudi Arabia, because of his affiliation with the banned Islamic group known as the Muslim Brotherhood. This group was founded in Egypt in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna. All other Islamist terrorist groups are offshoots of this group. When Sheikh al-Shamari fled his country, he left behind his wife Zainab bint Mahmud, his 3 sons, Mustafa, Taha, and Yassin, and his 2 daughters, Khadija and Aisha. At that time, Mustafa was 15 years old. His siblings are separated from each other by 1 year. Al-Shamari and his wife Zainab give birth every year until they had 5 children in 6 years of marriage. It took al-Shamari 5 years to arrange for his wife and 5 children to be smuggled out of Saudi Arabia. During those 5 years of separation, the father was involved in some terrorist activities in Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Israel. He boasted among his fellow terrorists that God had honored him by involving him in the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut on April 18, 1983, which killed 63 people, including 17 U.S. Marines. In those days, Sheikh al-Shamari barely spent time with his wife and 5 children. He was always on a terrorist mission in Jordan's neighboring countries. During those short visits, he gave birth to his last 2 daughters, Salama and Safia, and his son Mujahid. Al-Shamari's terrorist acts ended when he was ambushed and shot dead by IDF soldiers on the border between Israel and Lebanon. The death of the father was a great disaster for the family. His widowed wife, Zainab bint Mahmud, was left with 8 young children to raise on her own in a foreign country. She could not return to Saudi Arabia because she was smuggled out of her country without a Saudi passport or any official papers. Even if she could go back, she wouldn't be able to work because she's a remarkably young woman. For a few years, the family lived with little earnings from the work Mustafa and his other male siblings did in Jordan. Zainab is horrified when she learns that Mustafa has started attending the mosque regularly and is associated with terrorist associates of his late father. Mustafa was 17 years old when he started joining the Muslim Brotherhood. His mother knew that at that age he would not be given any leadership position. So eventually, he will be convinced to carry out a suicide mission. Zainab also discovered that Mustafa had begun to influence his 2 brothers, Taha and Yassin. At the time, these 2 brothers were 16 and 15 years old. They were at the best age to blow themselves up in the name of God. Terror leaders will never go on a suicide mission, but they always convince the young mujahideen to die as martyrs and end up in heaven with the marriage of the 72 virgins. Nor do they send their children to blow themselves up in the way of God. The truth of the matter is that many of them love to send their children to study at the best Western universities. While Zainab was worried about her 3 children, an Arab refugee woman suggested that she take her extended family and emigrate to the West. Following this advice, she pretended to be a Lebanese woman and joined a refugee camp in Amman City. Shortly thereafter, the family applied for resettlement in Australia. When the family arrived in Sydney, Mustafa was 19 years old. By then, he had mastered the teachings of the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad and had become a hater of everything un-Islamic. The immigrant Muslim boy whom Susan Peterson fell in love with and decided to make her life partner is none other than Mustafa al-Shamari. He is not like her Chinese ex-boyfriend. He does not drink alcohol and does not believe in premarital sex. He is a deeply religious Muslim boy who grew up with an exceptionally long beard. He attends the mosque regularly and fasts at least 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday, as the Prophet Muhammad used to do during his lifetime. Sweetheart, White Susan, could not believe her ears when her Arab lover Mustafa told her that he could not kiss her, not even shake hands, unless she became his legal Muslim wife. Hearing his words, Susan saw that he was a holy man of God, or an angel of God descended from heaven. Therefore, in a fleeting time, he became her idol, and she began to worship him. She learned a lot from him about Islam and Middle Eastern culture. Everything he told her about his religion seemed positive and good. He was incredibly careful in selecting those verses of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad that speak of peace and there is no compulsion in religion. He often read to her the abrogated verses of Mecca city praising Jews and Christians and acknowledged that they had heavenly books called the Torah of Moses and the Gospel of Jesus, just like the Quran of Muhammad. Therefore, the three religions, according to him, are true religions revealed by God. Mustafa deliberately hid from his Australian girlfriend all those Quranic verses and hadiths of his prophet that taught violence and hatred towards Jews and Christians and were full of misogynistic teachings. Susan would spend hours and hours with Mustafa without him touching her. She was very quick to learn the Arabic language and some Middle Eastern cultures from her Arab boyfriend. Chapter 2. The importance of marrying a Muslim bride. For some time, Susan, the Australian girl, hid her love affair with her Saudi Muslim boyfriend, Mustafa, from her Christian parents. When his love completely possessed her, she could no longer hide it. The unsurmountable problem facing Susan is not her parents, but her Muslim boyfriend who said he could not marry her until she converted to Islam. When they learn of her second friendship with a foreign student, her Christian parents are vehemently opposed to her affair with the Arab boy. They said that they did not mind if she treated him as a good friend and learned from him his language and culture, but that she should not marry him because he is a Muslim and she is a Christian. When Susan expresses her decision to marry her Arab boyfriend, her parents tell her that they may disown her if she marries a Muslim man and becomes a Muslim girl. They said that because they wanted to scare her and make her change her mind. Even her brother John tried to intervene and prevent his sister from marrying someone who was born and raised in a culture known for its hatred and aversion to Western values. Susan also rejected her brother's advice. She told her brother John that she had never seen in church or found anywhere in Australia a young man so pious and righteous as Mustafa. Blinded by his love, Susan does not mind sacrificing her relationship with her parents and brother and marrying the man of her dreams. Moreover, many of her close friends and classmates told her that they did not like the religiosity of her Arab lover and tried to dissuade her from devoting her future to the hands of such a fanatical Muslim man. Not only did Susan reject the advice of her family and friends, but she also converted to Islam. She put on the hijab and began to perform the daily Muslim prayer. She joined a group of Muslim women and recited verses from the Holy Quran with them. Some immigrant Muslim women and some Australian recent converts to Islam gather regularly at the house of the mosque's imam's wife and recite the Quran. Susan did not understand what she was reading. She is like a parrot imitating some Arabic words without understanding their meaning. When Mustafa made sure that Susan had left her Australian parents and her Christian religion and became a Muslim girl, he decided to marry her. The last condition that her Muslim friend demanded of her, which annoyed her greatly, was to change her name. Susan realized that the only thing that still connected her to her past life was her precious name. Mustafa wants her to pass away from her former self and be reborn into a Muslim girl to be religiously and racially qualified to marry him. Once again, she is carried away by her blind love and agrees to change her name to Irshad. Of course, her Arab lover chose this Muslim name. Irshad means dedication to learning the teachings of Islam. It also means religious guidance for the sake of God and His Messenger. She has not stopped changing her religion and her name, but Irshad is obligated to dress and behave like a well-mannered Muslim girl. She bought an Islamic dress that covered her body from head to toe, except for her face and a small part of her hands. Her Saudi lover told her that the Quran commands all Muslim women to wear the veil. He quotes a verse from the Quran to prove his point. Tell your wives and daughters and the women of the believers to wear their abayas or veils all over their bodies and to cover their entire bodies except for the eyes or. One eye sees the road. Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse 59. The Australian girl who recently converted to Islam has been banned from using perfume. Whatever Mustafa asked her to do, he backed it up with a verse from the Holy Quran or a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. For example, the above restriction is based on an authentic hadith of the Prophet of Islam. A woman who applies perfume to herself and passes in a group of men is an adulteress, Sunan Abu Dawud and Sunan al-Tirmidhi. And this hadith was narrated by Al-Nasai, Ibn Khuzaymah, and Ibn Hibban in this saying, the Prophet said, Whoever perfumes herself and then passes a group of people so that her scent reaches men, then she is an adulteress. The white girl was also forbidden to wear shirts, pants or slacks, and any short dresses. The Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, said, "May God curse the man who wore women's clothing and the woman who wore men's clothing." Of course, Irshad is now completely forbidden from wearing a bikini or visiting any pool or beach. She is not supposed to do any physical sports such as basketball, football, volleyball, running, swimming, or going to the gym. She is also forbidden to shake hands with men. This is confirmed by the Prophet who said, "When women pledge allegiance to him, I do not shake hands with women." Sunan ibn Malik, Al-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. It is also proven that Aisha said, "By God, the hand of the Messenger of God did not touch another woman, other than his wives, who used to take her vows verbally only." Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Irshad has been convinced that as a woman, she poses a great danger to men and society. Concerning this, the Prophet Muhammad said, "Beware of this world and beware of women." The first ordeal that afflicted the tribes of the children of Israel was with regard to women. Sahih Muslim. The Messenger said again, "I have not left behind a fitna or calamity more harmful to men than to women." Sahih Muslim. Even her relatives such as her father-in-law, brothers, uncles, and cousins are considered by the founder of Islam as dangerous people for her. The Prophet said, "Beware of entering upon women, foreign women." They said, "O Messenger of God, what do you say about in-laws?" He said, "In-laws are as dangerous as death." Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. As a Muslim woman, Irshad was told that it was illegal for her to travel from her home city to another city or country without having a mahram like her father and brother. The Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, said, "A woman should not travel except with a mahram." Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, meaning the mahram is the woman's relative such as her father, brother, and grandfather. Irshad was also taught by the wife of the Imam of the mosque what are her duties as a Muslim wife and what is the right of her Muslim husband over her. The Messenger of God, may God's prayers and peace be upon him, said, "If a man invites his wife to satisfy his desire in bed, she should come to him while she is busy in the oven." Book of Mishkat al-Masabi 1 Hadith number 61. And the Messenger of God said, "If a man invites his wife to his bed and she refuses, then he spends the night in anger. The angels will curse her until she gets up at dawn." Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7. Hadith number 121. The Prophet also said, "Who has the soul of Muhammad in his hand? A woman cannot fulfill her duty to God until she fulfills her duty to her husband. If he asks her about intimacy, even if she is on a camel saddle, she should not refuse." Sunan ibn Majah, Book 9, Hadith number 1926. In this regard, a prominent Malaysian Islamic scholar, Perak Mufti Tan Sri Harsani Zakaria said, "Even the Messenger says even when they ride on camel's back when the husband asks for it, she must give," he exclaimed. So there is no such thing as rape in marriage. This is made by the Europeans, so why should we follow it? In other words, a Muslim husband may rape his wife if she refuses to sleep with him. Then the Prophet said, "If I had commanded someone to prostrate themselves in front of someone, I would have ordered women to prostrate to their husbands for the sake of men's rights over women." Mishkat al-Masabi, Hadith number 70. Collectively narrated by Abu Dawud, Ahmed, Al-Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Ibn Hibban. However, the Imam's wife did not teach Irshad about many of the misogynistic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad and the verses of the Holy Quran that treat women as savage or less than an animal. For example, she did not tell her about female genital mutilation, wife beating, female child marriage, polygamy. A woman's testimony in court is equal to half that of a man. A woman's inheritance share is half that of a man. And a woman's inability to divorce her husband while the husband can divorce her with or without cause, custody of children after divorce goes to the father, etc., etc., etc. Irshad believed she had become a Christian nun when she began following the strict laws, rules, and regulations of Islam that restrict the lives of Muslim women. The only dividing line between her and the nun is that in Islam, she can marry a man and have sex with him, and they both give birth to children, but the fate of the nun is to remain a virgin who married herself to the Lord Jesus Christ. When Mustafa gets permission from the Imam's wife that Irshad has completely and totally changed into a suitable Muslim bride, he agrees to marry her. Their marriage met with strong opposition from her Arab lover's mother and his brothers and sisters. However, Mustafa went against the wishes of his Muslim family members as his friend Susan did with her Christian family. Their Islamic marriage was quite simple and was held by the Imam of the mosque. They celebrated their wedding by inviting a few select Muslim men and women. Then the guests enjoyed the delicious food prepared by some immigrant Muslim women in the newly married couple's new apartment. Mustafa said that he does not believe in the honeymoon, and therefore the first wedding night took place in the same apartment and on the same day that the marriage took place and was celebrated. The first fight between the newlywed couple and lovers took place on the first wedding night. The Saudi groom became furious and nearly divorced his Australian bride when he found out she was not a virgin. He knows that such a discovery in his home country would lead to an honor killing on the wedding bed. However, Irshad begged him to forgive her and accept her as his wife. She said she was tricked by a Buddhist and non-believer Chinese boy. She also said that at that time she was a Christian unbeliever and did not know that sex before marriage was forbidden by God. Irshad lied in this regard because she was taught by her church and her parents that having sex before and outside marriage is adultery. The new bride admitted her guilt but assured her groom that she had done so in her period of ignorance and infidelity. Despite this, Mustafa refused to pardon her until he consulted the Imam of the mosque. That same night, the Imam and his wife came to counsel the newly married couple. It is embarrassing for Irshad when the Imam and his wife begin to question her about her relationship with that infidel Chinese boy. Through their interrogations and investigations, Mustafa discovered added information that made him even more angry. He realizes that not only has his bride slept with someone before marriage, but she has also given birth to an illegitimate child. Then the repentant girl recounted her past relationship with tears. Having done so, she begged the Pakistani Imam and his wife to persuade her Arab husband to forgive her. The Imam and his wife accepted the confession of the one-day bride and asked her groom to pardon her. Reluctantly, the Saudi husband agreed to forgive his Australian wife, but only if she agreed to place her right hand on the Holy Quran and promised that she would never repeat such an ugly act again. And only then, after Irshad made this solemn promise, while placing her right hand on the Holy Quran and her left hand on her head, Mustafa forgave her and accepted her as his first Muslim wife and consummated the marriage with her.